This is Time Cat by Lloyd Alexander, and we've been reading this story for a few sessions now. I'm doing it chapter by chapter. So it's about Jason and his cat Gareth, who is a black cat with an orange eyes and a white mark on his chest. And he has the ability to travel with his friends through time. So he is currently with Jason in Egypt, and they are trapped in a room about to meet the Pharaoh, Neter-Khet. We will find out what happens. Chapter 3. Chapter 3, Neter-Khet. The heavy stone door swung shut behind him. Jason beat at it with his fists. He had never trusted the oily words of the chief scribe. How, Jason thought furiously, had he let himself be tricked so easily? He threw himself against the unyielding door, then, exhausted, dropped to the ground. Now Gareth was gone. Jason would spend the rest of his life in the stone cell in Neter-Khet's palace. The boy hid his face in his hands, and his shoulders shook with sobbing. At least, he consoled himself, the Egyptians loved cats, and Gareth would be well looked after. To Jason's surprise, a little while later the door opened and a sub-minor scribe peered in. Jason scrambled to his feet. Behind the sub-minor scribe were two guards who took him by the arms and marched him from the cell down one of the hall of columns after another, until Jason lost track of them all. In a huge room at the end of one corridor, on a platform topped by a carved and decorated throne, sat King Neter-Khet. Beside the king stood slaves with fly whisks and feathered fans on jeweled poles, musicians with trumpets and cymbals, and the chief scribe himself looking sour. In front of the throne sat Gareth. The cat, Jason saw, was watching Neter-Khet in much the same way that he would watch a beetle or something else that interested him, but didn't interest him very much. Great king, live forever, said the chief scribe. This is the wretch we found lurking behind the statue. Perhaps his presence here will help. We shall see, said Neter-Khet. In his high headdress and robes, arms crossed in front of him and holding the shepherd's crook and the flail of divine authority, the Pharaoh looked no different from the statues in the throne room. But Neter-Khet's face was dark and frowning. He looked, Jason thought, as if he never stopped being angry. I command this cat to play and entertain the Pharaoh, shouted King Neter-Khet at the top of his voice. The musicians clashed their cymbals. The slaves cried, life, health, strength, and the fly whisker whisked as fast as he could. Gareth did not move. Well, go ahead, boy, hissed the chief scribe. Make the cat be entertaining. Jason hesitated, then knelt on the floor beside Gareth. One of the slaves tossed down a toy, a bejeweled mouse on a golden chain. Jason pulled it back and forth in front of the cat, but he could tell from the set of Gareth's ears and whiskers that he was in no mood for games. Jason dropped the toy and shook his head. He doesn't want to, he said. I'm afraid there isn't anything I can do. Neter-Khet looked angrier than ever. I command this cat to purr and make himself agreeable to the Pharaoh, he shouted. Once again there was the clashing of cymbals and the cries of life, health, strength. The chief scribe took out a clay tablet. So it is ordered, he said. So it is written, and so it shall be done. Gareth still did not move. Jason shrugged hopelessly, then picked up Gareth and put him on Neter-Khet's lap. The king began stroking him, but Gareth put down his ears and squinted his eyes. He wriggled out of the Pharaoh's arms and leapt to the floor. Aye! Neter-Khet put his thumb to his mouth. One of Gareth's claws had accidentally scratched the king, and the Pharaoh's braided beard shook with rage. I'm sorry, Jason said. He doesn't feel like playing or being agreeable right now. It's nothing personal, he added quickly. It's just the way cats are. It's obvious, said the chief scribe, that the boy is useless. Return the cat to Bubastis, ordered Neter-Khet. He does not please me. Continue your search. And the boy? Asked the scribe. The sacred crocodiles are always hungry, he suggested cheerfully. Neter-Khet closed his eyes and nodded. So it is ordered, said the chief scribe, making another note on his tablet. So it shall be done. He gestured to the guards. Once again, Jason was seized and hustled down the vast corridors. He clung to Gareth and pressed his cheek against the cat's glossy fur. I don't care what they do to me, Jason whispered, frightened though he was. I'm just glad you didn't entertain the Pharaoh just because he ordered it. You be the way you are. That's all that counts. Don't worry, Jason added. The sacred crocodiles probably won't be hungry anyway. Jason heard a shout behind him. The guard stopped. It was Neter-Khet himself, waving his crooked flail. Return the cat! Return the boy to me! As Jason and Gareth entered the throne room, the cymbals clashed again, the trumpets blew, and the slaves began plying their fans. Stop that ridiculous whisking, Neter-Khet commanded. Get out, all of you, you too, he said, pointing his flail at the chief scribe. In the empty hall, Neter-Khet seemed too tired to climb the steps to his throne. Instead, he slumped down the edge of the platform. He took off his headdress, his wig, and, to Jason's amazement, even his braided beard. Without them, Neter-Khet didn't appear half as angry as before. For the last time, he said, are you sure there's nothing you can do? It's happened with every cat they brought in. All my subjects worship me. I'm a god, you know. My slaves are building the finest pyramid in Egypt, so things will be comfortable for me in the other world. But I can't find a cat to sit on my lap. And after all, we're both sacred. It's beyond me, absolutely beyond me. Neter-Khet looked so discouraged and unhappy that Jason could not help feeling sorry for him. You can't imagine how I've longed for a cat of my own, Neter-Khet continued wistfully, to stroke him and watch him play. When I was a child, I always had cats. They seemed very fond of me. Then after I became Pharaoh, they didn't seem to care for me half as much. Jason thought for a while. I don't know, he said at last. Did you wear that headdress and that beard before you got to be king? That might have frightened them. And another thing, he added, did you shout as much? Cats don't like being shouted at. Neter-Khet brightened a little. That might be it. Even so, Jason said, when you weren't shouting, you'd think they would come around again. Oh, they did, said Neter-Khet, but they'd never play or purr when I ordered. Did you expect them to? Jason said. No cat in the world will do that. But I'm Pharaoh, Neter-Khet said. I'm supposed to give orders. That doesn't mean anything to a cat, said Jason. Didn't anybody ever tell you? Nobody tells me, Neter-Khet said. I tell them. Besides, they were my cats, weren't they? In a way they were, Jason said, and in a way they weren't. A cat can belong to you, but you can't own him. There's a difference. Gareth, meantime, had padded over to the disconsolate Pharaoh and now began to rub his head affectionately against Neter-Khet's ankles. Listen, the king shouted, then clapped a hand to his mouth. Listen, he's purring, he whispered delightedly. But that's what I told you, Jason said. All cats are friendly if you give them a chance. Once in a while, they like to keep to themselves. They'll play and purr when they want to, and sometimes you have to wait. If you can understand that, I don't think you'll have any trouble at all finding a cat to please you. They'll please you just by being themselves. Gareth had hopped onto the vacant throne and sat there watching them. Considering how touchy Neter-Khet was about being Pharaoh, Jason rose and started to pick up Gareth. No, let him stay there if he wants to, said Neter-Khet. I have learned something this day. Not even Pharaoh can give orders to a cat. Later, Neter-Khet summoned the chief scribe. In the royal archives, said the king, you have listed this cat as one of my possessions. That must be changed. Neither he nor any cat who shall live in the great house shall be called a possession. Pharaoh is not his master, but his host and privileged friend. So it shall be written, said the chief scribe. Neter-Khet turned to Jason. I would be honored if you and your cat would choose to stay with me. We'd like to, said Jason, but we have a long way to go. Neter-Khet nodded. So it shall be. From his neck he took a golden ankh and hung it around Jason's old neck. Go in peace, strange travelers, he said. You have made me wonder whether Bast herself did not send you. Outside the great house, Jason and Gareth followed a path along the river. Well, Jason said, I'm glad Neter-Khet found out that it doesn't do much good to shout a lot of orders. Certainly not at cats, Gareth said, or people for that matter. The air trembled in the sunset. Although far from Bubastis, it seemed to Jason that he could still hear the strains of the hymns of the great cat. You know, Gareth, he said, your whiskers do look like the rays of the sun, and I do think you could hold the moon in your eyes if you wanted to. So the Egyptians say, Gareth answered. Oh, Gareth, Jason whispered, why don't you try? Not right now, said Gareth. He winked, and Egypt vanished. Oh, all right, very cool. So next up, we will find out what happens in Rome and Britain, 55 BC. That'll be the next one. All right, good job.
See you later. Bye.
All right.